You know, in Genesis 3 again, where the account is where Eve partakes of the forbidden fruit. Oh my goodness, don't we have a bunch of legends and euphemisms and the forbidden fruit, the poison apple, all that stuff. It's sad that this passage, and there's a lot of ways to come at the early part of Genesis to understand some things. And who knows, maybe we'll walk through a couple more stuff from Genesis. But I want to just take a stab at the magic banana theory here. By that I mean usually it's like, well, yeah, Eve she took a bite of that fruit, and God hates bananas and or apples, and if that's the thing, you could eat anything, but God, don't eat that one apple. You take a bite of that apple, that magic banana, you're out of here. Like, or perhaps there was some properties in the magic banana that once you ate them, they came flooding into your DNA, and suddenly you were aware of good and evil, and you didn't know there was good and evil before, and now, boy, now you've done it. Oh, look, here's the deal. Look at the text. There's, first of all, the whole idea about that is that there is complete freedom in the garden. Go live how you want. But freedom happens within just some boundaries. So there's freedom within boundary happens, and so the boundary is don't eat of that fruit. You can imagine the unlimited freedom, but in that almost unlimited freedom, there is a single small boundary, and that boundary the Scripture doesn't give us a lot of reason for it. It doesn't give us a lot of justification other than the fact that God is the one who said it. So the idea would be, as the reader, the narrator, and hopefully what we should try to infer from the audience here, the members, the participants, Adam and Eve, is that according to the supreme goodness of God, God's supreme moral goodness and righteous judgment, according to we acknowledge that God is morally supreme, and that his judgments are altogether righteous, and in acknowledgement of that and respect for that, I do what he says. I recognize he is the supreme moral judge. He alone is good. He is so good and trustworthy, I obey him. He decides what's right and wrong, and I respond, I obey, and I live within the freedom of those boundaries. But then, of course, what about that magic banana, the serpent says. And Eve says, no, we're not supposed to have that. And he says, but if you do, you'll be like God. You'll be able to, we say knowledge of good and evil, like somehow if she ate the magic banana, suddenly she'd have an awareness of what is right and wrong. Listen, you cannot operate. I don't believe for a moment that Adam and Eve had no concept of wrong or right. Moral freedom requires the ability to discern right from wrong or decide right from wrong. As a matter of fact, she already knew she knew something was wrong, what wrong was, because she said, no, God said not to do that. That's the wrong thing. I'm not supposed to do that. She already knew good and evil, was aware of it. But she trusted or acknowledged that good and evil was what God said. God said, if God says it's good, it's good. If God says it's evil, it's evil. But watch this. Verse 6 says, the woman was convinced. She saw that the tree was beautiful and its fruit looked delicious, and she wanted the wisdom it would give her, so she took of the fruit and ate it. This is Eve. In taking this thing, that is her deciding. I will decide for myself what is good or evil. I decide right and wrong. I decide. And when she takes that act of taking that fruit and acting on her own, she is asserting herself. She's deciding. She's being in deception. She decides that she knows what's right and wrong. That right and wrong is determined by her preferences and by what sounds good or what's pleasing to her. And of course, she offers it to Adam, and he's like, sounds good to me, and he does it. But see, there it is. There's the problem of sin, and the knowledge of good and evil isn't the fact that I suddenly become aware that there's good and evil. That's not a problem. The problem is when I decide what good is or what evil is. And when you look at it that way, you can look around. You can look around the world every day, and everywhere you look, people are they're deciding for themselves. I'll decide what's right and wrong. I'll decide what is truth, what is right. I'll decide what is fair. I'll decide righteousness. I'll decide what is moral. And every time that they make their own decision instead of trusting the supreme moral goodness of God, that's a hope. That's the magic banana. Makes much more sense to me. It breaks my heart. But the application still comes back to you and me. We can point our fingers and say, "Oh, they were so stupid to have that fruit. I'm not even having. I don't even have a fruit bowl in my house. I'm staying righteous." Come on. Every time you decide, every time you assert your preferences and your decisions over God's boundaries,